A dream, 50 years in the making. A golden anniversary trip to Rome. For James and Martha Harrison, it was the culmination of a lifetime of love-hard work and quiet sacrifice. But at Westwood International Airport, that dream was about to be systematically dismantled at the boarding gate by an agent fueled by petty cruelty. They were told their tickets were invalid, their life savings suddenly worthless. Humiliated, dismissed, and stranded, they faced a cold wall of corporate indifference. The gate agent, Patricia Higgins, had all the power. Or so she thought. What she didn't know was that the elderly black couple she was tormenting had a son. A son who just happened to be the executive director of the entire airport. And he was on his way. The air in the taxi hummed with an energy that had been building for half a century. James Harrison reached over and squeezed his wife's hand. His own calloused palm enveloping her softer age-spotted one. Martha Harrison beamed, her eyes framed by gentle wrinkles, sparkling with the same light he'd fallen in love with 53 years ago. Today was the day, their 50th wedding anniversary gift to each other, 2 weeks in Rome. The Eternal City, a place they'd only ever seen in library books and on television documentaries. James had been a carpenter, a man who built sturdy, reliable things with his hands. Martha had been a first-grade teacher, shaping young minds with patience and wisdom. They had built a life, a home, and a family on the foundations of love and perseverance. They'd raised 2 children, seen them off to college, and watched them build their own successful lives. Their son David was their pride and joy, though his job was so complex they hardly understood it. Something about logistics and operations at the airport. He was always busy, always professional, but never too busy for his parents. This trip was the capstone of their life's savings. It represented every extra shift James had taken, every dollar Martha had squirreled away from her modest salary. Their luggage, a matching set of sturdy navy blue suitcases, sat in the trunk. Inside Martha's carry-on was a worn, leather-bound journal, its first page inscribed in her elegant cursive, James and Martha's Roman Adventure, 2025. Westwood International Airport was a cathedral of modern transit, a sprawling city of glass and steel, humming with the frantic energy of 1,000 intersecting journeys. For a moment, they just stood inside the main concourse, 2 small figures in a river of humanity, feeling a delightful sense of awe. "Can you believe it, Jimmy?" Martha whispered, clutching his arm. "We're really here." "I can, Marty," he smiled. "Now let's go find Apex Air and get this show on the road. Flight 815 to Rome." They navigated the signs with the careful precision of their generation arriving at the Apex Air check-in counter. After a brief, pleasant exchange with the agent at baggage drop, they were directed toward the security checkpoint, and then to their departure gate, B12. The atmosphere at gate B12 was different. The calm efficiency of the main terminal had been replaced by a palpable tension. The flight was full, and the waiting area was a chaotic sea of rolling bags, crying babies, and anxious travelers. Presiding over it all from behind a tall counter was a gate agent with a severe blonde haircut and a name tag that read, Patricia. Patricia Higgins moved with a sharp, bird-like efficiency that bordered on aggression. She snapped at a young man who asked if he could charge his phone, pointing to a sign without even looking at him. She spoke into the microphone with a clipped, condescending tone, her voice echoing with thinly veiled impatience. James and Martha exchanged a look. "She seems a bit stressed," Martha murmured, ever the diplomat. "Long day, I suppose," James replied, though a knot of unease was beginning to form in his stomach. He'd dealt with all kinds of people in his line of work, and he recognized the type, someone who wielded their tiny sliver of authority like a weapon. They waited patiently for their boarding group to be called. Group 3. When the announcement came, they joined the queue, their boarding passes and passports held ready. The line moved slowly, punctuated by Patricia's sharp commands. "Have your documents open to the photo page, liquids out and ready for inspection at the jet bridge. We don't have all day." When the Harrisons reached the front of the line, James offered a polite smile. "Good afternoon." Patricia didn't return the smile. Her eyes, the color of a winter sky, flickered from their faces down to the tickets in James's hand. She took them without a word and scanned the barcodes. A sharp negative beep echoed from the machine. She scanned them again. Another beep. She looked up, her expression a mixture of triumph and annoyance. "There's a problem," she stated flatly. James's smile faltered. "A problem? What sort of problem?" "Everything was confirmed this morning." "The system is showing your seat assignment as unconfirmed," Patricia said, tapping a key on her computer. "It looks like your tickets have been flagged." Martha leaned forward, her brow furrowed with concern. "Flagged? What does that mean?" "We bought these 6 months ago." Patricia sighed, a theatrical display of exasperation meant for the growing line behind them. "It means," she said, drawing the word out, "that there is an issue with the payment processing. According to my system, the transaction was voided." The world seemed to tilt slightly under James's feet. "Voided? That's impossible. I have the bank statement. The money was withdrawn. We have the email confirmation." He fumbled for his phone, his fingers suddenly feeling clumsy and thick. "Sir, your phone means nothing to me," Patricia snapped, her voice rising. "My system, the official Apex Air system, says these tickets are not valid for travel. You will have to step aside." She gestured dismissively to the side of the counter, already looking past them to the next passenger. The knot in James's stomach tightened into a cold, hard stone of dread. This wasn't a mistake. This was a dismissal, and their dream of Rome was starting to crumble into dust right before their eyes. "Ma'am, please." James began, his voice steady, despite the tremor of shock running through him. "There must be a misunderstanding. Can you just check again? The names are Harrison, James, and Martha." Patricia let out another long-suffering sigh. She turned back to her monitor, typed with performative slowness, and then shook her head. No misunderstanding. The system is clear. The purchase was flagged for irregularities and subsequently cancelled. You should have received an email." "We received no such email," Martha insisted, her voice trembling slightly. "We received a confirmation and a reminder to check in yesterday. Everything was fine yesterday." "Systems get updated," Patricia retorted, her gaze sweeping over them as if they were a particularly unpleasant stain on the carpet. "If you don't have a valid ticket, you can't board. It's that simple. Now please, you are holding up the entire flight." The people in line behind them were beginning to murmur. Stares that had been impatient were now turning curious, some tinged with pity, others with annoyance. James felt a hot flush of shame creep up his neck. He and Martha had lived their lives with dignity. They were private, unassuming people. To be the center of this kind of public spectacle was a profound humiliation. "Could we please speak to a supervisor?" James asked, clinging to the hope that another person, a more reasonable person, might untangle this nightmare. Patricia's lips tightened into a thin, bloodless line. It was the look of someone whose authority had been questioned. With a dramatic flourish, she picked up a phone. "Robert, "I need you at gate B12. I have a passenger dispute." She said the word dispute with a particular venom, as if the Harrisons were unruly hooligans rather than a confused elderly couple. A few minutes later, a harried-looking man in a slightly ill-fitting suit scurried up to the counter. His name tag read, "Robert Peterson, Customer Service Supervisor." He avoided looking directly at the Harrisons, instead focusing on Patricia. "What's the issue, Patty?" he asked, his voice low. "These people," she said, gesturing toward them with her pen, "are insisting their cancelled tickets are valid. I've explained the situation twice, but they refuse to move." Robert finally turned his watery blue eyes on James and Martha. He offered a weak, apologetic smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Folks, I'm sorry for the trouble, but Patricia is our most diligent agent. If she says there's a system flag, then there's a flag. We have to follow protocol." "But what is the protocol for fixing a mistake?" James pressed, holding up his phone where he had finally pulled up the bank statement. "Look, here is the charge. Apex Air, 4 fouls, $782. It cleared our account 6 months ago. How can the ticket be cancelled if you took our money?" Robert peered at the phone from a distance, refusing to take it. "Sir, I can't verify third-party documents. The only thing that matters is what our system says. Sometimes these things happen. A glitch, a security hold. The airline reserves the right to cancel any reservation. So you took our money, cancelled our tickets without telling us, and now you're just going to leave us stranded." Martha's voice cracked, the injustice of it all overwhelming her. Tears welled in her eyes. This was our 50th anniversary trip. The sight of his wife's tears ignited a protective fire in James. His politeness evaporated, replaced by a cold, quiet anger. "This isn't right," he said, his voice low and firm. "You're not even trying to help. You're just trying to get rid of us." Robert shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. "Sir, there's nothing more I can do at the gate. The flight is closing. You can go back to the ticketing counter outside security and see if they can rebook you, but you would have to purchase new tickets at today's price, assuming there are even seats available on another flight, which is unlikely." New tickets, at the last-minute price. It would cost a fortune they didn't have. They had saved for years for these tickets. It was a bureaucratic checkmate. They were trapped. The final call for Flight 815 to Rome echoed through the terminal. The last few passengers scurried past them, pointedly avoiding eye contact. The jet bridge door was about to close. Martha tugged on James's sleeve, her face a mask of defeat. "Jimmy, let's just go," she whispered, her voice choked with tears. "Let's just go home." Home. The word felt like a punch to the gut. To turn around defeated and drive back to their quiet house, the dream of Rome dead and buried under a pile of corporate red tape and sheer indifference. James looked at his wife's face, at the dream draining from her eyes, and then he looked back at Patricia, who was watching them with a smirk of undisguised satisfaction. Something inside him refused to break. He thought of his son, David. David, who always had a solution. David, who worked here in this very airport. He didn't know what David did exactly, but he knew people. Maybe he knew someone in ticketing. It was a long shot, a desperate final prayer. "No, Marty," James said, his resolve hardening. "Not yet." He pulled out his phone again, his thumb hovering over the contact labeled David. He hated to bother him at work, but this was more than an inconvenience. This was an injustice. This was their life's dream, and he wouldn't let it be stolen by a cruel gate agent and her spineless supervisor. He pressed the call button. David Harrison was in the middle of a presentation. He stood at the head of a gleaming mahogany table in the airport's executive boardroom. On the wall-mounted screen behind him was a complex logistical chart detailing a proposed overhaul of the cargo handling operations for the entire eastern seaboard. The room was filled with airline executives, FAA officials, and senior members of his own Westwood International team. This was a billion-dollar conversation. His phone, set on the table beside his laptop, vibrated. The screen lit up. Dad. David's focus didn't waver. He'd told his parents he had a major meeting this afternoon. They wouldn't call unless it was important. He held up a hand to his audience. "Excuse me for one moment, gentlemen." He answered the call, his voice low and professional. "Hi, Dad. Is everything okay?" "David." "Son, I'm so sorry to bother you." James's voice was strained, tight, with an emotion David hadn't heard since the day their family dog had passed away 15 years ago. We're at the airport." "I know, Dad. Are you at the gate? Your flight should be boarding soon. Is Mom excited?" "We're at the gate," James said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "But they won't let us on the plane." David's entire posture changed. The detached professionalism fell away, replaced by sharp, focused concern. "What do you mean they won't let you on?" "What happened? They said our tickets were cancelled, that the payment was voided. But David, the money came out of my account months ago. We have all the confirmations. The agent here, she won't even look at it. Her supervisor is with her, and they just keep telling us to leave." David could hear the tremor in his father's voice, the deep well of humiliation behind the words. And then he heard his mother softly crying in the background. A cold, dangerous calm settled over David. The billion-dollar logistics chart, the room full of powerful executives, all of it faded into white noise. There was only the sound of his father's strained voice and his mother's tears. "Dad, listen to me." David said, his voice now devoid of any warmth, replaced by pure, uncut authority. "What gate are you at?" "B12, Apex Air." "And the agent's name?" "Patricia. Her supervisor's name is Robert." "Okay, don't move, don't talk to the men anymore. Just stand to the side and wait for me. I'm on my way." "David, you're in a meeting." "The meeting is over," David said, and hung up the phone. He turned back to the stunned boardroom. "Gentlemen, a critical operational failure has just come to my attention that requires my immediate personal supervision. We will have to reschedule. My assistant will be in touch." He didn't wait for a response. He strode out of the room, pulling his phone out again and speed dialing. "Cynthia," he said to his executive assistant, "get me Frank Murdoch, head of security, on the line, now, and have him meet me at the entrance to Concourse B. I also want you to pull up the full employee files for a gate agent named Patricia Higgins and a supervisor named Robert Peterson, both with Apex Air. I want their performance reviews, any commendations, and any and all customer complaints. Have it on my tablet in 5 minutes." As David walked, his pace was a controlled fury. He moved through the polished corridors of the executive wing with a purpose that made people instinctively step out of his way. Staff members who recognized him, from janitors to operations managers, nodded respectfully. "Mr. Harrison." "Good afternoon, Director." He was no longer David the son. He was David Harrison, the Executive Director of Westwood International Airport. Every inch of the 5,000-acre facility, every runway, every terminal, every gate fell under his ultimate jurisdiction. The airlines were tenants in his building, and they operated under a strict set of standards and leases that he personally oversaw. An airline causing a problem for a passenger was a customer service issue. An airline humiliating his parents was a declaration of war. He met the head of security, a burly ex-cop named Frank Murdoch, at the concourse entrance. "Frank, I want you to come with me, to gate B12. David said, his voice low. "I want you to bring a handheld camera. I want you to record everything that happens from the moment we arrive. Do not intervene unless I give you a direct order. Is that understood?" Frank, who had seen David handle everything from bomb threats to international diplomatic incidents, saw the look in his boss's eyes and knew this was something different. This was personal. "Understood, Director." David's tablet chimed. Cynthia had sent the files. He scanned them as he walked his long strides, eating up the distance down the concourse. Patricia Higgins, 14 years with the airline. A string of minor complaints about rudeness, all dismissed by her supervisor, Robert Peterson. Several commendations from Peterson for efficiency and strict adherence to protocol. A pattern began to form. He saw them as he rounded the final corner. His father, standing ramrod straight, his arm around his mother, who was trying to discreetly wipe her eyes. They looked whole, isolated, and profoundly weary. And standing at the now empty gate counter, chatting idly as the ground crew prepared to push the plane back, were Patricia and Robert. Patricia glanced over at his parents, and a small, cruel smile played on her lips. The cold calm in David's chest solidified into ice. He took a deep breath, straightened his tie, and began the final walk toward Gate B12. The reckoning was about to begin. David and Frank Murdoch approached the gate with silent, deliberate steps. The casual chatter between Patricia and Robert died down as they noticed the two men in dark suits approaching. They didn't recognize David. To them, he was just another official-looking person, perhaps, from corporate coming to ask about the flight's on-time departure. "Can I help you?" Patricia asked, her tone shifting to one of professional deference, a stark contrast to the way she had addressed his parents. "The flight to Rome has been closed out." David ignored her. His eyes went straight to his parents. He walked to them, wrapped his arms around his mother and then his father. "It's okay," he whispered. "I'm here now. Everything is going to be all right." Martha looked up. Her eyes red-rimmed but filled with relief. James simply nodded, a world of gratitude passing between father and son. David turned back to the counter, his expression now glacial. "I'm looking for Patricia Higgins and Robert Peterson." Patricia puffed up slightly. "I'm Patricia Higgins. This is my supervisor, Robert Peterson. What is this regarding?" "This is regarding Mr. and Mrs. Harrison," David said, gesturing to his parents. "I understand you denied them boarding on Flight 815. Robert stepped forward, adopting his managerial persona. "That's correct, sir. Unfortunately, their tickets were flagged in our system as cancelled due to a payment issue. It was out of our hands. We have to follow policy." "I see," David said softly. "And what policy is that exactly? Please cite for me the specific Apex Air Regulation number that instructs you to refuse assistance to passengers whose funds you have already accepted." Robert blinked. "Well, it's not a specific number. It's just general policy about invalid tickets." "So there is no specific policy," David stated, his voice like chipping stone. "You just made a judgment call. Let's talk about your system. Is it infallible, Mr. Peterson? Has it ever been known to have delays in updating or to produce errors? Well, no system is perfect, but you chose to trust a potentially flawed system over a customer's proof of payment, and your own common sense," David finished for him. He then turned his full attention to Patricia, whose face had begun to pale. "Ms. Higgins, my father tells me you were the one who initially handled this. He said you were dismissive and unhelpful." "I was following procedure," she insisted, her voice suddenly high-pitched. "I have a flight to manage. I can't spend all day on one ticketing issue." "Your job isn't just to manage a flight," David corrected her, his voice rising with controlled force. "It's to provide service to the passengers who pay your salary. Passengers like my parents. Passengers who saved for years for this trip, only to be publicly humiliated by you." A flicker of realization, followed by pure terror, crossed Patricia's face. She looked from David to the elderly couple and back again. Your parents?" she stammered. Robert Peterson looked as if he was about to be physically ill. "Sir, we didn't know." "Know what?" David shot back, taking a step closer to the counter. "That their son was someone you might have to answer to. Does a passenger's right to be treated with dignity and respect depend on who they know? Is that the Apex Air policy?" He let the question hang in the air, a damning indictment. He turned to Frank Murdoch. "Frank, is the camera rolling?" "Yes, Director," Frank replied, the title echoing in the suddenly silent gate area. The word Director landed like a physical blow. Patricia swayed slightly, grabbing the counter for support. Robert's jaw went slack. The color drained completely from his face. "Director," Robert whispered, his voice barely audible. "David Harrison," David said, leaving no room for doubt. "Executive Director of Westwood International Airport. This airport, the one you are currently operating in. And as of this moment, I am lodging a formal top-level complaint against Apex Air, and specifically against the two of you for gross misconduct, passenger mistreatment, and a potential violation of the civil rights of my guests." He turned to a nearby airport operations phone and dialed. "This is Harrison. I want you to hold Flight 815 at the gate. Do not push back. Inform the captain there is a security matter at the jet bridge." "Yes, a security matter. The safety and security of our passengers is paramount, and I have reason to believe the screening process at this gate conducted by Apex Air staff was compromised by prejudice." He hung up and looked back at the two shell-shocked employees. "Now," he said, his voice dropping to a deadly calm, "we're going to fix this. You, Mr. Peterson, are going to get on your radio and have your station manager meet me here in 2 minutes. You, Ms. Higgins, are going to take my parents' original boarding passes, walk onto that aircraft, and find 2 first-class seats for them. If the cabin is full, you will politely ask 2 passengers in first class if they would be willing to move to my parents' original seats in exchange for a $1,000 travel voucher each, which I will personally authorize. Then you will come back and escort my parents onto that plane, apologizing to them for the distress you have caused." He wasn't finished. "After you have done that, you will both report to the station manager's office, where you will wait for me, Mr. Murdoch, and a representative from our legal department. Your conduct today has raised serious questions about Apex Air's fitness to operate out of this facility. This isn't a customer complaint anymore. This is now an official airport investigation." He walked back to his parents, his expression softening as he looked at them. "Mom, Dad, they're going to get you on your flight. I am so sorry this happened." Martha, overwhelmed, simply hugged him tightly. James clapped his son on the shoulder, his eyes shining with a fierce, profound pride. He had known his son was successful. He had not understood until this very moment the depth of that success or the strength of the man he had become. He watched as a terrified Patricia Higgins, under the watchful eye of the head of security, scurried onto the plane to do exactly as she was told. The balance of power at Gate B12 had been irrevocably and justly reversed. The Harrisons' departure for Rome was only the beginning. For David, getting his parents on the plane was the immediate fix. Dismantling the system that allowed the incident to happen was the mission. The next morning, the fallout began. David convened an emergency meeting in the same boardroom where he'd been presenting just 24 hours earlier. This time, the attendees were different. The airport's chief legal counsel, the head of public relations, Frank Murdoch from security, and summoned under threat of lease violation, the senior vice president of North American operations for Apex Air, a slick corporate executive named Gerald Stowe. Mr. Stowe. David began dispensing with pleasantries. Yesterday afternoon at Gate B12, 2 of your employees, Patricia Higgins and Robert Peterson, baselessly denied boarding to 2 elderly passengers. They were subjected to public humiliation based on a so-called system flag that your staff made no effort to investigate or resolve. Stowe shifted in his expensive suit. Mr. Harrison, on behalf of Apex Air, I want to offer my sincerest apologies for this unfortunate misunderstanding. We have already suspended the 2 employees in question, and we are prepared to offer your parents a significant travel credit as a gesture of our goodwill. David leaned forward, his hands clasped on the table. Gerald, let's be very clear. This isn't about a travel credit. This isn't a misunderstanding. This is a symptom of a disease within your corporate culture, and I now have the evidence to prove it. He nodded to Frank, who dimmed the lights. The large screen at the end of the table lit up. First it showed the pristine security footage Frank had recorded. The condescending tone of Patricia Higgins, the weak compliance of Robert Peterson, the tear-streaked face of Martha Harrison. It was all there in high definition. Stowe squirmed. That's the appetizer, David said. Now for the main course. The screen changed to a spreadsheet. My office, as you know, has access to certain operational data. After this incident, I tasked my team with running an analysis of all boarding denials and random secondary security screenings initiated by Apex Air gate agents at Westwood over the past 2 years. We filtered it by agent. A chart appeared showing Patricia Higgins's name at the top, with a dramatically long red bar next to it. Ms. Higgins flags passengers for secondary checks and denies boarding at a rate 400% higher than the airline average. Interesting, isn't it? But it gets more interesting. He clicked again. The data was now cross-referenced by demographics. Of the passengers, Ms. Higgins has flagged over 70% were people of color. The payment irregularity flag, the one she used on my parents, has been used almost exclusively on elderly, Black and Hispanic passengers. It's a pattern, Gerald. A clear, undeniable, and frankly illegal pattern of discrimination. Stowe was ashen. I had no idea. This is the action of one rogue employee. Is it? David countered, his voice like ice. Because my team also cross-referenced performance reviews. He brought up Robert Peterson's reviews of Patricia Higgins. Highlighted phrases glowed on the screen. Proactive in identifying potential security risks. Doesn't bow to passenger pressure. Effectively manages gate integrity. Her supervisor, Mr. Peterson, consistently rewarded her for this behavior, David said. He praised her for what he called gate integrity, which in practice was targeted harassment. This isn't a rogue employee, Gerald. This is a rotten branch being cultivated by a sick tree. The final blow came from an unexpected source. That afternoon, a junior gate agent for Apex Air, a young woman who had witnessed the Harrison incident, and countless others saw her moment. Fearing for her job, but spurred by her conscience, she anonymously forwarded a chain of internal emails to a well-known investigative journalist. The emails were from Robert Peterson to his team of gate agents. In them he encouraged vigilance and offered small bonuses to agents who had the cleanest flights, meaning flights that departed without any passenger disputes holding them up. He praised Patricia Higgins as a model for resolving issues quickly by standing firm on policy, effectively incentivizing agents to dismiss passengers with problems rather than helping them. By the evening news, the story had exploded. It wasn't just about a powerful man helping his parents. The narrative fed by the leaked emails and a statement from David Harrison's office about the data they had uncovered was now about systemic discrimination at a major American airline. The headline was devastating: Apex Air accused of widespread discriminatory practices after airport directors' parents targeted. Apex Air's stock began to plummet in after-hours trading. Their PR department was in a full-blown meltdown. The small, ugly incident at Gate B12 had unraveled thread by thread to expose a rot that went far deeper than anyone imagined. The fallout was swift and brutal. In the court of public opinion, Apex Air was guilty, and the verdict was delivered through cancelled bookings and a nose-diving reputation. The story became a national firestorm. Talk shows debated it. Newspapers ran editorials, and social media was ablaze with the hashtag #FlyApexGet profiled. The video Frank Murdoch had recorded strategically leaked by the airport's PR department to the journalist who broke the email story went viral. Seeing the calm, dignified couple being dismissed so cruelly by Patricia Higgins struck a nerve with millions. For Patricia, the consequences were absolute. She was terminated by Apex Air within 24 hours of the story breaking. But her troubles were just beginning. Armed with David's data and the testimony of the whistleblower, the NAACP filed a class action civil rights lawsuit against Apex Air, naming both Patricia Higgins and Robert Peterson personally in the filing. Other passengers seeing the news came forward with their own stories of being mistreated by her, their complaints previously ignored. She found herself not just jobless, but a pariah facing financial ruin and public disgrace. The smirk she wore at Gate B12 had cost her everything. Robert Peterson was also fired. His attempts to paint himself as an unwitting manager who was duped by a rogue employee fell apart under the weight of his own emails. He became a case study in failed leadership, a man who not only enabled prejudice, but incentivized it for the sake of empty corporate metrics. He too was named in the lawsuit, his career in the airline industry over. Apex Air was forced into a massive, humiliating public reckoning. Gerald Stowe was fired. The CEO had to issue a groveling televised apology. They agreed to a massive settlement in the class action lawsuit, which included millions in compensation for the victims and the establishment of a fund for diversity and inclusion training. They were also forced by the Department of Transportation to submit to years of federal monitoring. The cost to their bottom line and their brand was catastrophic, a wound that would take years, if not decades, to heal. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away, James and Martha Harrison were walking through the Borghese Gardens in Rome. The Italian sun warmed their faces. They had visited the Colosseum, stood in awe inside the Sistine Chapel, and tossed coins into the Trevi Fountain, making a wish not for themselves, but for their son. They were aware of the storm raging back home. David had called them, of course, to check in and give them a quiet summary of the events. They felt a certain sorrow that their dream trip had been born out of such an ugly moment, but that sorrow was vastly outweighed by an immense pride. Sitting on a marble bench overlooking the city, Martha took out her journal. She turned past the first page and wrote, "Our son David did not just get us to Rome. He reminded the world that everyone's journey deserves respect. He made sure that what happened to us will not happen to others. He is a builder just like his father. He doesn't build with wood, but with justice. James read the words over her shoulder and squeezed her hand the same way he had in the taxi on the way to the airport. The humiliation they had felt at gate B12 was a fading scar cauterized by the fierce, protective love of their son and the resounding echo of consequence that followed. Their golden anniversary trip had become more than a vacation. It had become a testament to the fact that while prejudice may be powerful, the truth, when wielded by someone with courage, is far more powerful still. 3 months after his parents returned from Rome, the storm had passed, or so it seemed. At Westwood International Airport, the name Apex Air was now synonymous with reform. The airline had launched a multi-million-dollar advertising campaign centered on A New Apex, A New Promise, featuring smiling, diverse families being treated with exemplary service. Their old aggressive eagle logo had been softened, its sharp angles sounded into something less predatory. On the surface, it was a masterclass in corporate damage control. David Harrison watched it all from his office, the panoramic window giving him a godlike view of the runways where thousands of stories, big and small, took off and landed each day. The lawsuit had been settled. The federal monitors were in place, poring over Apex's data. His parents' vacation photos were framed on his desk, James and Martha beaming in front of the Trevi fountain, looking happier and more relaxed than he had seen them in years. By all accounts, it was a victory, a clean, decisive win. Yet David felt a lingering disquiet. He knew that changing a logo was easy. Changing a culture was hard. The rot he had exposed, personified by Patricia Higgins and Robert Peterson, was a symptom of something that had been allowed to fester for years. You couldn't fix that with a new slogan and a few mandatory sensitivity training modules. His unease was given a name one rainy Tuesday afternoon, in the form of a discreet, anonymous email that slipped past his assistant and into his personal inbox. The sender's address was a jumble of random letters and numbers from a secure, encrypted service. The subject line was simply, Gate B12. David's blood ran cold. He opened it. Mr. Harrison, you don't know me, but my name is Alicia Rowe. I was the junior gate agent for Apex, who was working the shift after your parents' incident. I am the one who forwarded Mr. Peterson's emails to the press. I did it because it was the right thing to do. I believed in the change that you seemed to be forcing upon Apex Air. I was wrong. They found out it was me. Not officially, of course. They are too smart for that. There was no formal accusation, no HR meeting. It was quieter. My shifts were changed to a rotating schedule of nights and early mornings, making any semblance of a personal life impossible. My requests for days off, previously always approved, were suddenly always pending review until it was too late. During my performance evaluation last week, my new supervisor, a close friend of Robert Peterson's, wrote me up for being insubordinate because I spent too much time helping a non-English speaking passenger find a connecting flight. They are freezing me out, Mr. Harrison. They are building a paper trail of incompetence so they can fire me for cause in a few months and claim it had nothing to do with the leak. The new Apex is a lie. It's the same machine, just with a fresh coat of paint. The message is clear. Do not cross the company. I'm writing to you not to ask for help, because I know you have done so much already, but to let you know the truth. Thank you for standing up for your parents. It gave me the courage to do what I did. I just wish it had actually mattered. Sincerely, Alicia Rowe. David read the email 3 times. The clean win suddenly felt dirty incomplete. He had slayed the dragon, but he'd left one of the heroes on the battlefield to be devoured by wolves. His intervention had been a loud, thunderous clap of justice, but the retaliation Alicia was facing was a quiet, creeping poison. It was insidious, deniable, and in many ways more cruel. He felt a surge of cold fury that eclipsed what he'd felt even for his parents. The mistreatment of his parents was an act of arrogant prejudice. This was different. This was a calculated, vindictive punishment of someone who had risked everything for a principle. It was proof that Apex Air's public apology was nothing more than a strategic retreat, and that in the shadows they were sharpening their knives. His first instinct was to pick up the phone and tear into the new SVP of operations at Apex. But he reined himself in. That was the old playbook. They would expect it. They would have their denials ready. We're not aware of any retaliation. Ms. Rowe's performance issues are a confidential HR matter. We take all employee concerns seriously and will investigate internally. It would be a smokescreen buying them time to finalize her termination. He couldn't use a sledgehammer this time. He needed a scalpel. He summoned Frank Murdoch to his office. The burly head of security sat down, his expression serious. David slid his tablet across the desk, showing him the email. Frank read it and let out a low whistle. They're trying to bury her. They are, David confirmed. And we are not going to let them. I can't launch another formal airport-level investigation without concrete proof of lease violation. This is an internal HR matter, and they'll stonewall me. So we need to work differently. You still have contacts inside Apex, don't you? Friends on the ground, crew in baggage handling, people who have been there for years. Frank nodded slowly. A few old-timers. They don't like the corporate suits any more than we do. Good, David said. I want you to put out some feelers, quietly. I want to know about Alicia Rowe. Is she a good employee? What's her reputation among her peers, not her bosses? And I want to know about her new supervisor. What's his story? I also want to know what this new sensitivity training actually entails. Is it real or is it a joke? While Frank began his discreet inquiries, David pursued another angle. He scheduled a routine quarterly check-in with the lead federal monitor assigned to Apex Air, a no-nonsense woman from the Department of Transportation named Maria Flores. In her office over stale coffee, David steered the conversation. So Maria, how is the new Apex looking from your side? He asked casually. It's looking like a lot of paperwork, she sighed, gesturing to a stack of binders. They're ticking all the boxes. New training materials have been drafted, new oversight committees formed. On paper, they're a model citizen. And off paper, David pressed gently. Flores leaned forward, lowering her voice. Off paper, the culture feels resistant. There's a lot of resentment toward the monitoring, a sense that they were unfairly targeted. A lot of middle managers who came up under the old guard are still in place. They're saying the right things in the meetings, but I get the feeling they're just waiting for us to leave. Have you heard any whispers of retaliation against employees who cooperated with the initial investigation or spoke out? David asked, keeping his tone hypothetical. Flores's eyes sharpened. That would be a direct violation of the consent decree. A very, very serious one. It would trigger automatic severe penalties. Do you have a specific reason to ask, Director? Just a gut feeling, David said, pulling back slightly. The kind of feeling that makes me want to be extra vigilant. I trust you'll let me know if any such whispers reach your ears. He had planted the seed. Flores was now watching for it. A week later, Frank came back with the results of his reconnaissance. The picture was exactly as David had feared. Alicia Rowe was universally liked by her colleagues. They called her by the book, but with a heart, someone who would always trade a shift to help a co-worker in need. Her new supervisor, however, was a different story. He was known as a company man, a crony of Robert Peterson's, who believed the whole Harrison affair was an overblown PR stunt. The most damning piece of information came from a baggage handler who had been forced to sit through the new training. "It was a joke, Director," the man had told Frank. "A 20-minute PowerPoint presentation you had to click through. Most of us just had it running in the background while we did other work. There was a quiz at the end, but you could take it as many times as you wanted until you passed. It was just for show." David now had what he needed. It wasn't enough for a lawsuit, but it was more than enough for a kill shot. He didn't schedule a meeting. He didn't send an email. He waited until 7 p.m. long after the business day was over and called the personal cell phone of the new Apex SVP, a man named Henderson. "Henderson," David said, his voice calm and level. "Director Harrison, is everything all right?" Henderson sounded surprised and wary. "No, Mr. Henderson, it's not," David replied. "I'm calling about the integrity of the federal consent decree your airline is currently operating under, specifically the clause about whistleblower protections." There was a moment of charged silence on the line. "I'm not sure what you're referring to," Henderson said, his voice tightening. "Then let me be specific," David said. "I'm referring to a junior gate agent named Alicia Rowe. She's a good employee with a stellar record, who, after having the courage to expose the rot within your management structure, is now being systematically harassed, isolated, and managed toward termination by a supervisor who is a known associate of the man she helped expose. You're building a fraudulent case to fire the woman who helped save your company from itself. Director, those are extremely serious and unfounded allegations. Are they?" David cut him off. "Because I can assure you my sources are impeccable. I also know that your mandatory new training is a sham, a 20-minute PowerPoint that your staff are ignoring. So here is what is going to happen. Sometime in the next 12 hours, Alicia Rowe is going to receive a formal apology from your office. Her fraudulent performance review will be expunged from her record. You are going to offer her a promotion to a lead training position at any hub of her choice in North America, with a commensurate salary increase and a relocation package. You're going to put the person you tried to silence in charge of teaching your new employees how not to be like Patricia Higgins." That's highly irregular," Henderson stammered. "This is a highly irregular situation," David shot back. "Consider it my recommendation. And you should know that I had a very interesting chat with Maria Flores at the DOT this week. She's very keen on the topic of whistleblower retaliation. I imagine a prominent journalist would be too. Imagine the headline, 'Mr. Henderson, Apex Air's New Promise. A lie as whistleblower is hunted by management.' It would undo every dollar you've spent on advertising. It would prove your CEO's apology was a lie. It would prove the rot was never cut out. It would be the end of you. The choice is yours." He didn't need to say another word. He hung up the phone. 2 days later, another anonymous email appeared in his inbox. "Mr. Harrison, I don't know what you did, but they called me. I start next month in Denver as a lead trainer. They apologized. I think they were afraid. Thank you." It did matter after all. Alicia. That Thanksgiving, as David sat in his parents' warm, cozy living room, the smell of roasting turkey filling the air, he looked at the photos from Rome on the mantelpiece. "You know, son," his father said, coming to stand beside him. "We never did thank that young woman who helped, the one who sent the emails." David smiled, a genuine, untroubled smile. "I passed along our thanks, Dad." He looked from the photos to his parents' faces full of love and contentment. "She's doing just fine. She's helping them build something better." The victory, he realized, was never one single moment. It wasn't a confrontation at a gate or a meeting in a boardroom. It was a process. It was the constant, vigilant work of holding power to account, of protecting the brave, and of ensuring that a promise of change was not just spoken, but honored. The echoes of Gate B12 had finally begun to fade, replaced by the quiet, steady sound of justice being built one person at a time. The story of James and Martha Harrison is a stark and powerful reminder that dignity is not negotiable, and that prejudice, no matter how cleverly disguised by rules and regulations, ultimately has a price. It's a testament to the fact that one person's refusal to accept injustice, not just for themselves, but for everyone, can ripple outwards, forcing an entire corporation to confront the ugliness within. But it also begs the question, how many times does this happen without a viral video, without a powerful son in a position to make a call? The Harrison story had a just ending, but it began with an injustice that is all too common. If this story resonated with you, and if you believe that accountability is paramount in our society, please help us share this message. Give this video a thumbs up to help it reach more people. Share it with your friends and family to spark a conversation. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel for more true-to-life stories, where the truth against all odds finally comes to light. Thank you for listening.